Hi there, I'm Bobby Daniel, and this is Dr. Thomas Krannnawitter, and he just wrote an amazing pamphlet called The Introduction to American Citizenship. It's available on Amazon with all of his other awesome books that I've read, and I just love so much. So I'm so honored that you're here. I want to really
Thank you.
You can't talk.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, but you can't talk. Natural rights. Could you explain those? I feel like rights get thrown around rather loosely, and I think it's on purpose actually, so
Yes.
you don't know what they are, and anyone who's trying to, powers that be, trying to control you, don't necessarily want you to be empowered to know what those natural rights are.
Great. Yes. Great question. The whole term rights has become a tremendous source of confusion, or a source of tremendous confusion in modern American politics. Effectively, today, many Americans think that a right is anything they want. If there's something they want, they think they have a right to it. And
my toddler acts like that.
right. Yeah. Yes. Little kids act exactly that way. And yet there's an older way of thinking about rights, a classical way, that's objective. It's not so subjective. It's not so idiosyncratic. And it can be summed up in this notion, as you just mentioned, of natural rights. So what does that mean? Natural rights is another way of saying a rightful claim, something to which you have a rightful claim by your nature, which of course raises the question, well, what kind of nature do you have? Well, you have the nature of a human being. You participate in human nature. And human nature is unique in this way. I'm going to draw here for a moment briefly on sort of the classical philosophic understanding of human nature. Human beings are the only earthly creatures that have a compound or a complex soul. And what that means, Aristotle describes this, all the animals and beasts, what drives them, what motivates them is their instinct. That's what they have. And that's why, for example, a wolf has no choice to act as anything other than a wolf. A cow has no choice to act as anything other than a cow, because all that they have is their instinct. In that sense, their soul is a simple soul. We human beings, we have instincts. We have all the same instincts that animals have. We have instinctual appetites to sleep, for food, for all those kinds of things. But we also have something else. We have a mind. We can reason. We can think. We can make choices. We can choose to negate or ignore our instincts, right? There are many times, and anyone who's gone on a diet knows what it means to make a choice, right? To ignore your instinct says,
I'm starving.
I really want to eat, right? And yet you make a choice. Right. I'm not going to eat so much.
And I want to look into some food.
Exactly. Or when we take bad tasting medicine. Remember, what was her name? Julie Andrews has that great song in the old Mary Poppins movie, right? Yeah. Spoonful of sugar. Yes. The medicine might taste badly. Our instinct doesn't want it, but we make a choice. I'm going to take the medicine anyway because I know in the long term that will be good for me. That's what I mean when I say human nature is complex. There's more than just instinct in there. There's also reason and choice and free will mixed into our soul. And that means we are aware of ourselves. We can make choices for ourselves in a way that no other earthly beast can do. They simply lack the capacity. They lack mind. So they can't make those kinds of choices. It also means nature seems to be indicating that my mind is housed in my body. Therefore, my mind should govern my body. What my hands and feet do should be determined by my mind, not someone else's mind. And as a scholar of the history of slavery and the Civil War and related subjects, I define slavery as the mind of one person controlling the body of another. right? That's the essence of slavery. The essence of freedom and self-government is each person's mind governing their own body, their own person. Well, that gives rise, that points to the notion of property. I, my mind, my soul, my person, I own my body. However unimpressive it is, it doesn't belong to any other human being. No other human being has a rightful claim to it. I have a rightful claim to my body and my body alone. I don't have a rightful claim to the body of anyone else. Each of us has a rightful claim by our nature. This is not a right that is created by a law. In fact, natural rights, when they're understood, become the standard by which we evaluate laws. A law that says each citizen is secure, is free to speak what's on their mind and write what they want to write and own the property that they produce. And if anyone tries to steal it, the law says that's theft and they'll be punished. Those kinds of laws, we say those are legitimate. Those are correct laws because they align with this notion of natural rights. Laws that say a person has no claim to their own property, government is going to come take it. Or if one person with one color skin wants to own a person with a different color skin, the law is going to protect that relationship. Those laws, we say, those are illegitimate. Those are mistaken. Those are wrong because they violate natural rights. They're not in line with it. So natural rights don't come from the laws. They don't depend on the law. They don't depend on government. Rather, they show us what government and laws are supposed to be, what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to protect people in their own person and property.
So in China, if you live in China,
yeah,
you still have natural rights. You
absolutely
just don't have a government that necessarily protects those.
So again, this notion of natural rights is something a human being has a rightful claim to by their nature. Now, by my nature, I have the nature of a human being. I have a right to my mind, everything that goes on in my mind, my thoughts, my ideas. Those are mine. My speech, I own it. I'm also responsible for it. So if I utter things that you really dislike, and then you don't want to talk to me anymore, you're not my friend, I'm responsible for that because those are my words that come out of my mouth. My body is mine, my labor. If I set my hands to working and I make something, build something, cultivate something, whatever that thing is that I've made, that belongs to me as well. All those things I have a rightful claim to. I use the example sometimes of slavery, and I will show a picture of these are horrible pictures. They're gripping images to look at. A slave being tied around a tree trunk and being whipped and beaten by his master. And let's suppose here, just to make this a really clean illustration, let us suppose that the slave did nothing wrong, no injustice. Maybe the slave was trying to escape, wanted to leave, and the master is going to send a message to all the other slaves that slave got caught. He's going to beat him and torture him to disincentivize all the other slaves from trying to do the same. And at that moment, when that slave is bound and being beaten and tortured, I'll ask students, does that slave at that moment have a natural right to his own person, to his own property, to his freedom? And many students will say, well, no. Look at it, he's being beaten and, tied up against his will. And I'll say, well, if he does not have a natural right to himself, why is it wrong? What's happening? Why is that wrong? And in fact, there's another way to kind of enter into the same subject. Show that image to students of a slave master beating a slave and ask the question, is that right or is that wrong? And every student is going to say, well, that's wrong. And that raises the question, why? Why is it wrong? It's wrong because the slave has a natural right to his own person, to his own property, to his body, to his freedom of choice. And the master is violating the natural rights. The slave has the natural rights. The other person, the master, is violating them at that moment. That's what the Declaration of Independence means when it says in that famous second sentence that these rights are inalienable. They cannot be alienated from us. I cannot take your natural rights, your rightful claim to your person and your property. I can't take that away. I can violate them, right? And anyone watching can say that's wrong, what's happening, but I cannot remove your rightful claim to yourself. So long as you're a human being, you will always have a rightful claim to your person and your property, even when you're living under a government and under laws that don't respect that violate that. What that means is that government, those laws, they're wrong, they're misguided, they're mistaken. They ought to be remade, they ought to be corrected so that they line up with natural rights. The other little piece of this notion of a natural right. So if a natural right is anything to which a person has a rightful claim by nature, that raises the question, well, are there things to which a person does not have a rightful claim by nature? Yeah, there are things that you do not have a rightful claim to by your nature, namely the person and property of other people. You as a human being have no rightful claim to the person or property of someone else. So when you stand up and say, well, I can't afford health care, I can't afford education for my children, I can't afford a house, but I have a right to it. I have a right to health care, I have a right to education, I have a right to housing. What are you really saying? What you're really saying is, I have a right to make someone else pay for it. Which is really saying, I have a right to their money. I have a right to their property. And the truth is that you don't. You don't have a rightful claim. You're perfectly free to ask them, and then they're free to offer you something or not offer you something, but you don't have a rightful claim to it. And that's the distinction between this notion of natural rights, rightful claims by our human nature, versus something like an economic right, claiming a right to some product or some service that someone else has to produce or pay for.
What do you say to people who will say, well, you don't have a right to just die in the street because you don't have medical care?
Well, that raises the question, why would someone die in the street? Well, maybe they would die in the street because they're very sick. Well, is there a solution to that? Is there a cure? Well, there might be. Maybe there's a medicine. Maybe there's a treatment. Well, how does one get that? If you want that, how do you get that? In fact, just make it more general. How do you get anything that you want? Well, you create wealth, you work productively so that you can trade, you can purchase all the things that you want. And the beautiful thing about living in a free society, there's no limit on how productive you are. You are free to be as productive as you want throughout your entire life so that you're in a position to go buy the kinds of things that you want to buy. That's the beautiful thing about it.
Thank you. That was
You're
really
welcome.
great.